When a dying engine rolled into the lot, one decision changed everything. Fired for helping a stranger, single dad Jonathan thought he'd hit rock bottom. But what he didn't know was that the man he saved had powerful connections and a secret mission. Would you risk everything for a stranger's voice crackling over the radio? The rain had started just before dusk, a heavy, relentless curtain that turned the warehouse lot into a maze of mud and reflections. Jonathan Muller wiped grease from his hands with a rag that had long since given up being clean. His back ached from hours hunched under semi-trucks that had seen better decades. But the real weight pressing on him wasn't physical. It was the constant hum of worry, the math of survival. Rent was due next week. Garrett's worn-out sneakers had holes in the soles. And his manager Lou was breathing down his neck again. "Wrap it up, soldier boy," Lou barked from his office door, flicking a cigarette into a puddle. "Fleet needs diagnostics by sunrise. Don't waste your time on strays." Jonathan bit his tongue. He knew that tone, dismissive, mocking. Lou loved to throw his military past in his face whenever he got the chance. He turned back to the undercarriage of the truck, tools clinking beside him, rain tapping the metal overhead like a slow countdown. Then the CB crackled. The static was faint at first, swallowed by thunder. But it sharpened. "Breaker. This is Delta 9 to base. Engines shot. Got no pressure, no lights. Kid, I ain't got time to die out here." Jonathan's hand froze. A rig rolled into the lot, barely moving. Its headlights flickered, steam hissing from the hood like a wounded animal. The truck groaned to a stop near Bay 4 and sat there, idling with uneven coughs. Lou appeared again, mouth twisted. "Don't touch it. We're not a charity garage." But Jonathan was already moving. Something about that voice, raw, gravelly, desperate, ignited something in his chest. The door of the old rig creaked open, and out stepped a man who looked like he'd driven straight out of the past. Chad Sarge Stevens. Long silver beard, faded green jacket with a frayed American flag patch on the sleeve. His right leg dragged slightly, his eyes sunken but alert. He leaned against the door, wheezing. "Got meds in the back for a clinic out near Mace Ridge. Kids there. They're waiting up." Jonathan didn't ask for permission. The rain came harder as he opened the hood. The engine compartment was a mess of heat and damage. Head gasket nearly blown, fan belt shredded. No parts, no time, no budget. But there was always a way if you had hands, grit, and enough desperation. He scavenged wire, borrowed a fan belt from a yard mule, rigged a bypass for coolant flow, all while water soaked his uniform, turning gravel into sludge beneath his boots. Sarge sat nearby under the awning, watching silently, hands trembling from cold, or maybe memory. He didn't say much, but when he did, it cut through the night. Used to patch up engines like this in Nam. Helicopters, mostly. Funny. You'd think I'd be past all this. Jonathan glanced up. "You ever really get past anything?" They worked in silence until the engine coughed, then roared to life. Unstable but alive. Enough to make it down the road. Sarge stood and reached into his coat. He pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. "Ain't much. It's all I got." Jonathan hesitated. Then he took it, not for the money, but because it was offered with dignity. Sarge nodded once, climbed back into the truck, and drove into the rain. By morning, the yard smelled of oil and coffee. The crew had gathered around Bay 4, murmuring. Lou strutted out, a man on a mission. He jabbed a finger into Jonathan's chest. "You think you're a damn hero? That truck wasn't on our docket. That was a liability." Jonathan stood straight. He was hauling meds. For kids. Lou's voice rose. "You disobeyed a direct order. You're done here." And just like that, it was over. The tools Jonathan had used for years were locked away. His locker was emptied. The other mechanics watched in silence, some with shame, others with indifference. Garrett waited outside in the beat-up Ford pickup they shared. He looked up from his tablet, confused. "Dad? What happened?" Jonathan didn't answer. He just started the engine and drove. The scrapyard was a downgrade in every possible way. Loud, filthy, underpaid. But they needed the money. He took the job the same day. Garrett, without telling him, started helping after school. Cleaning up, organizing spare parts, pretending he was just hanging out while sneaking in hours of unpaid labor. And somewhere down a winding road, Sarge's rig reached a small rural clinic just before sunrise. Nurses swarmed the cargo. Inside one of the packages, a critical dose of medication for a 5-year-old girl suffering from respiratory failure. The doctor later told Sarge they were minutes away from losing her. Sarge didn't stick around for thanks. He pulled into a rest stop, poured black coffee from a thermos, and picked up a burner phone. His hands shook slightly as he dialed. "Kenny, it's me. Listen, I need to tell you about a mechanic I met." The mansion sat like a fortress at the edge of the pines, glass, steel, and stone carved into perfection. A private gate buzzed open as Sarge's battered rig limped up the drive, coughing gray smoke that looked out of place against the manicured hedges. A security guard raised an eyebrow but waved him through. No one denied access to someone with the last name Stevens. Not even that Stevens. Kenny Stevens, in his crisp shirt and tailored slacks, stood on the marble porch, arms folded. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his smile practiced but genuine. "You look like hell," he said. "Yeah," Sarge rasped, climbing out of the cab, "but I still showed up." It had been years since they'd seen each other. A few sporadic phone calls, one funeral, and now this. Inside, the house was quiet, too quiet. Sarge scanned the expensive silence as they walked through the modern kitchen toward Kenny's office. Mahogany shelves, awards, plaques. A photo of Kenny shaking hands with the governor. Another of their parents, long gone. Sarge sat heavily on a leather chair that resisted his weight. "I met someone," he began, "down near Chesterfield. Mechanic. Good one. Guy didn't ask questions, didn't ask for money. Just fixed the damn truck and sent me on my way." Kenny raised a brow. "What's his name?" "Jonathan Muller. Single dad. Vet. Same eyes I had when I got back." Kenny didn't say much, just leaned back and laced his fingers together. But Sarge could tell. Something about that name, that story, lit a spark behind his polished exterior. Meanwhile, across town, the scrapyard roared with the sound of crushing metal and diesel engines. Jonathan moved through it like a ghost, hands working, mind elsewhere. The job was demeaning, the pay insulting, and the company worse. His new co-workers, a trio of bitter men who hadn't smiled in decades, treated him like an outsider. One of them, a guy named Red, made it personal. "Heard you used to be a soldier," Red sneered, spitting chew near Jonathan's boots. "Now you're just another grunt shoveling junk." Jonathan didn't rise to it. He'd been through worse. But at night, when he climbed into the pickup and saw Garrett pretending to sleep in the passenger seat, the guilt hit hard. Garrett wasn't fooled. At home, he waited until his dad fell asleep, then powered up his laptop. His fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing firewalls like a video game. He didn't do it for revenge. He did it because he knew something was wrong. The warehouse where Jonathan had worked ran maintenance reports through a cloud server. Garrett found discrepancies within an hour, identical inspection logs submitted for different trucks, dates that didn't match up, signatures copy-pasted. And then he found the jackpot. Lou had been diverting budget funds marked for fleet safety upgrades, brake systems, tire replacements, onboard diagnostics, and redirecting them to a dummy vendor. A fake company that traced back to a bank account under a different name. But Garrett knew how to dig deeper. And when he did, that name turned out to be Lou's sister-in-law. A textbook fraud loop. He printed the documents, slid them into a folder, and labeled it with one word: proof. That night, the rain had returned. Lighter now, a drizzle that whispered against the windows of the Lucky Spoon Diner. A 24-hour joint off the interstate with vinyl booths, and the smell of burnt coffee soaked into the walls. Jonathan sat nursing a black coffee, exhaustion clinging to him like an old jacket. The bell over the door rang, and in walked Sarge. Shoulders hunched, coat dripping, boots heavy with mud. He slid into the booth opposite. They didn't speak at first, just sat there, two men who had seen too much. "You were Army?" Sarge finally asked. Iraq, 3 tours. Eddie took some friends and left me with a limp and a temper, Jonathan said. Vietnam, Mekong Delta. We learned to stop asking names. Easier that way. A silence settled over them. Not awkward, just real. 2 other men sat across the room, older, quiet, also watching. Veterans recognize each other without needing to speak. Sarge nodded toward them in respect. Then he leaned in. I've been using Kenny's trucks. Didn't ask. Didn't tell. I just borrowed 'em. Vets out there livin' intense. Clinics running out of insulin. Figured if I got caught, so be it. What are they gonna do? Court-martial me again? Jonathan didn't flinch. He sipped his coffee. You're not a criminal. You're a soldier doing what no one else will. Sarge exhaled. A deep, tired sound. Something in him shifted. A wall cracked. Every time I make a delivery, I feel like I'm buying back a piece of myself. The part that got left over there. I know it's stupid. I know I can't fix it all. But hell, someone's gotta try. Jonathan looked him in the eyes. It's not stupid. It's honor. Even if no one else sees it. And Sarge felt it. Not redemption. Not absolution. Just relief. That someone understood. That he wasn't completely alone. Back at Kenny's estate, the CEO stared at his monitor, reviewing footage from a rest stop camera where Sarge's rig had idled the morning after the storm. Jonathan appeared in one frame, soaked to the bone, tools in hand. Kenny hit pause. You may have found your redemption, brother, he murmured. Now let's see if he finds his. The computer screen glowed in the dark like a single eye watching Garrett breathe. He sat hunched over the keyboard, headphones on, heart thudding. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was about to do. On the screen was a folder labeled Safety Violations and Fraud. Inside it, emails, falsified maintenance logs, siphoned invoices, and the final touch, an anonymous tip written in plain, careful language. Attached is evidence of misappropriation of funds and falsified maintenance reports by Lou Carver, warehouse manager of Redgate Distribution. My name isn't important, but the lives he's endangering are. He hesitated just a second before clicking send. Then he shut the laptop. The silence in the room buzzed louder than any machine. By the 3rd day, it had begun. Redgate's yard was in chaos. Investigators in windbreakers and safety vests roamed the lot, clipboard in hand. Corporate had flown in 2 HR reps. A tall man in a pressed suit barked orders as drivers were pulled from trucks and mechanics from their bays. Lou stormed around red-faced and sweaty, yelling about witch hunts and false claims. But he was unraveling, and everyone could see it. The crew, once loyal or at least afraid, now watched with cold curiosity. At the back of the yard, Garrett stood unnoticed behind a fence, hidden by a stack of crates. He watched Lou stomp toward a trailer and slam the door behind him. The boy didn't smile. He didn't need to. Justice was in motion. Across town, the scrapyard baked under the late sun. Rust steamed in the heat as Jonathan stood wiping his hands on a rag, staring at a dented exhaust manifold. He didn't hear the footsteps at first. You Jonathan Muller? He turned to see a man in a simple button-down shirt, jeans, and a cap that read Praxis Freight Solutions. I might be, Jonathan said cautiously. Depends on who's asking. Name's Ken, the man smiled. I work with a logistics firm out of Nashville. We're looking for mechanical talent to help us evaluate some of our rigs before we roll out fleet-wide updates. Got your name from a guy at the diner. Said you saved his truck in a rainstorm. Jonathan squinted. There was something too polished about the guy's boots. Too smooth about the way he didn't blink. You want to pay me to test drive a truck? Not just any truck, Ken said, patting his shoulder. Something special. The rig was parked just outside the city. A sleek, matte gray machine that gleamed like a stealth jet. Jonathan climbed into the cab and immediately noticed the difference. The seats had biometric adjusters. The dash had a touchscreen interface. The whole thing smelled like brand new leather and software. Run it like you would any job, Kenny said, watching from the passenger side. As the truck pulled onto the highway, Jonathan listened. He felt Something was off. Not a noise exactly. More like a hum, buried beneath the road noise. A rhythm that shouldn't have been there. After 10 minutes, he spoke. She's clean, but there's a torsional pulse in the drivetrain. High frequency, probably from the transmission. You guys using a new torque converter? Kenny turned slowly. How the hell did you? It's vibrating through the frame. Most guys wouldn't feel it unless they were hauling full load in a crosswind. But it's there. Kenny sat back in silence. His eyes glinted with something close to awe. Noted. He offered no further questions. But in his mind, the plan was already changing. That night, in their small, two-bedroom trailer, Garrett sat at the kitchen table with his head down. He had printed the email chain just in case. His fingers gripped the edge of the paper like it might run away. "Dad," he began quietly, "I need to tell you something. About Redgate." Jonathan looked up from his bowl of reheated chili. "It was me. I sent the proof. To a journalist. The story's already out. That's why they're investigating. I used your name in one of the log files. I had to. I'm sorry." Silence. Garrett braced for anger or maybe disappointment. But instead, he felt arms wrap around him. "You did what was right," Jonathan whispered, his voice thick. "That's what matters. Not how old you are. Not who listens. You stood up. I'm proud of you." Garrett's shoulders shook with silent relief. "I just didn't want to see you treated like garbage anymore." "Me neither, son. Me neither." But as Garrett pulls away from the embrace, Jonathan notices how clammy his son's skin feels. His forehead is damp with sweat, though the room isn't warm. "You okay, bud?" he asks. Garrett shrugs it off with a nervous laugh, saying he skipped lunch. But it's the third time this week Jonathan has seen his son go pale and unsteady after school. He files it away, concern growing like a quiet storm in the back of his mind. Later that week, the rain came back. A soft drizzle turned to a steady pour as Sarge sat outside the diner in his truck, engine off. The smell of oil and rain mixed in the cab, triggering something deep and dark. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. "Charlie, down. Get down. Where's the damn smoke coming from?" "We're pinned, move." His breathing quickened. His eyes darted. Then came the cold sweat. The door creaked open, and Jonathan appeared. He didn't say anything, just climbed into the passenger seat and sat there. Minutes passed. Sarge's hands finally let go of the wheel. His breath slowed, and when he looked at Jonathan, he saw no judgment. "Sometimes it comes back all at once," he said hoarsely. "Yeah," Jonathan replied. "Sometimes it doesn't leave at all." They didn't talk much that night, but when they did, it wasn't about war. It was about now, about healing, about moving forward even if the road was cracked and the sky never quite cleared. And when they stepped out into the rain, Sarge stood a little straighter. His feet were still heavy, but his heart, lighter. Back in his office, Kenny stared at a photo he'd secretly taken during the test drive. Jonathan, focused, calm, in his element. He smiled to himself. "Maybe this world still has a few good men left," he said. "Time to give one of them a shot." The sun was just beginning a lazy climb over the edge of the scrapyard when Kenny returned. Not in disguise this time, not with a hat pulled low or a fake business card. He walked straight through the gate in a pressed navy suit, flanked by the low rumble of a luxury SUV idling in the street behind him. Jonathan was under a busted school bus, trying to loosen a rusted bracket. He recognized the shoes first, clean, polished, out of place. "So," Jonathan said, sliding out with grease on his shirt and a socket wrench in hand, "recruiters wear Rolexes now?" Kenny chuckled, brushing rain off his shoulder. Didn't lie about being impressed, just left out a few details. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folder. Crisp, thick, weighted. "My name's Kenny Stevens, CEO of Interstate Freight Solutions. We operate over 2,000 trucks nationwide. But this," he tapped the folder, "this is for you." Jonathan opened it slowly. The top page read, "Offer of employment. Lead field mechanic, Interstate Freight Solutions." The next lines blurred for a moment. His eyes tried to focus, but his mind had slipped behind, caught in a storm of disbelief. A six-figure salary, a full relocation package, a team under his command. And at the bottom, scribbled in blue ink, "We don't move trucks. We move people." Then Kenny added quietly, "And full medical coverage. That includes dependents." Jonathan looked up, suddenly alert. "What do you mean?" Kenny exhaled. "I'm not just offering this job out of charity. My brother trusts you. That means something. But I also did my homework. Garrett's been to urgent care 5 times in the past year. Unexplained fatigue. Elevated heart rate. He's hiding something, and you're too busy surviving to notice." The wrench fell from Jonathan's hand. That night, Jonathan didn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table long after Garrett went to bed. The job offer opened again beside a half-finished cup of coffee. He wasn't angry, not at Garrett. He was angry at himself, for missing the signs, for being buried under too many bills and too much pride. But pride wouldn't pay for specialists. Pride wouldn't keep his son healthy. When Garrett shuffled into the room around midnight, Jonathan met him with tired eyes. "We need to talk." Garrett froze. "About your heart. About why you've been hiding it." A long pause. Then Garrett sat, defeated. "I didn't want to be a burden. You were already working so much. I figured I could handle it." Jonathan shook his head. His hand reached across the table and gripped his son's tightly. "You're not a burden. You're the reason I'm still standing." Then gently he smiled. "We've got options now. Good ones." A week later, at IFS headquarters, Kenny stood in a glass-walled conference room overlooking a fleet of trucks lined in perfect rows. Jonathan entered wearing a clean polo with the company's logo embroidered on the chest. He looked out of place until he didn't. Kenny gestured toward a digital blueprint on the wall. "You'll oversee safety retrofits across every region, starting with our older rigs. I want the whole system rebuilt around drivers' needs, not quarterly targets." Jonathan nodded, absorbing every detail. Then he said quietly, "I want to bring someone in." Kenny didn't need to ask. "Sarge. He's got eyes for the ones falling through the cracks. Vets, rural drivers, people who think no one's listening." Kenny's jaw tightened. "He's been using our trucks behind my back. To help people," Jonathan countered. "Not steal. Not profit. He's doing the work you say this company values." A pause. Then Kenny looked down at the IFS patch on his blazer. "We just launched a veterans initiative. Mentorship, outreach, training. No one's running it yet." He looked up. "You think he'll take it? If you let him do it his way." Kenny smiled. "What other way is there?" No grand ceremony or applause. Just 3 figures standing in the morning light beside a gleaming white semi-truck parked outside the IFS regional hub. The logo shimmered in blue. IFS, People Before Freight. Sarge wore a new IFS vest, frayed just slightly at the collar, the way he liked it. Garrett stood in between them, arms crossed, trying not to smile too wide. And Jonathan? He just stood still, one hand on the truck's hood like he was anchoring himself to something real. "You ever think we'd end up here?" Sarge asked. "Not in a million years," Jonathan said. "But I'm damn glad we did." They didn't need to say anything else, because some victories aren't shouted. Some battles end not with a bang, but with a beginning. This story reminds us that doing the right thing often comes with a cost, but sometimes it brings unexpected rewards. What would you have done in Jonathan's place? Risk your job for a stranger's plea? Let us know in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to give it a like, share, and subscribe to embrace the journey, where every mile tells a story.